beautifuls. You are listening to Bliss and Grit. I'm Brooke Thomas, and I'm going to be joined soon by my dear friend and co-host, Vanessa Scotto. On the show, we're talking about being on the embodied spiritual path and what does that actually mean? So what is a real evolution of our lives? How do we ultimately embrace everything? All the beauty and crazy, the joys and the messes, the bliss and the grit that is a human life. We're attempting to figure that out as we go along here on the show. In today's episode, we're talking about love and relationships. So we got a really great comment on social media asking us essentially to talk about love and relationships. And what she wrote was, what role does the ego play in relationships, specifically related to attraction? So how do I know if my true self is attracted to this person or it's my ego that's attracted to this person? Well, we have, as usual, an awful lot to say about that. Probably something we could have done over 10 episodes, but we got some of it covered in this one. We're going over some spiritual concepts like pain bodies and the ego, and psychological concepts like attachment theory and projective identification. And we're trying to tackle some of how we choose a partner and how we can switch it up if we need to in the direction of sane, loving, easy, nourishing relationships. If you're enjoying the show, we would be totally delighted if you left a review for us on iTunes or on our Facebook page, which is Bliss and Grit. You can also head over to blissandgrit.com and subscribe if you want to catch any updates on events we might have coming up for the community. One last note for those of you who are unfamiliar, we have potty mouths a little bit, so you might want to wear headphones if you're at work or in a place where you don't want profanity being spouted around. Okay, here we go.
This is Vanessa, everyone, and hi, Brooke.
Hello.
Okay, well, a couple of weeks ago, while we were the week of our ego episode, if you will, we got a comment from one of our listeners, and she was saying that she was a little confused sometimes when she was listening to the conversation on the ego versus the true self. And she put a comment down that I want to read because we're going to talk about it. So she said, the big question for me right now is what role does the ego play in relationships, specifically attraction? I.e., is it my ego that likes him or is it my true self that likes him? So we thought that talking about love and relationships was a good direction to take it in today. So, Brooke, you want to take it away?
Sure. I've got it all figured out. Just kidding. I have no idea what I'm going to say.
That's like, I was listening to our episode last week when I was editing it, and I was like laughing in my head about when you're like, well, what Buddha meant or what Gandhi meant, you know, when we're...
Right. Here's what Gandhi meant, guys. Yeah. I know.
Because I kept saying, well, what Buddha meant in the Four Noble Truths was...
So, what Buddha meant to say was, okay. So
here's love advice from on high. You're welcome.
You're welcome. Okay. So love and relationships. Well, I think it's a great investigation exactly for the reason why she brought it in, because we all have love and relationship experiences. And it's really a nice way to play with these concepts of like ego. And she used the phrase higher self, which we can dissect a little bit.
She said true self.
True self. Okay. True self. In our tangible experiences. And really nothing is more fraught except maybe our relationships with our parents than our intimate parents, very fraught, but intimate relationships, love relationships. It's where, so much of our light shows up. And it's also where so much of our shadow material and our darkness and our habits and our conditioning shows up. And, it gets to be tricky territory. So just to like give a broad frame, because it's the broad frame we often give. And so I think useful to keep touching back in on this. The concept, which this terminology comes from Martha Beck, who's a life coach. The concept of clench, unclench applies here too. Now, just saying that means jack shit because it's about what we can actually sense. And what the listener was asking about was like, how do I know if my compass is set to true north or if it's pointing to this strange other place. And it's very, for all of us, tricky stuff. But I would say like, and maybe this kicks it off. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Like the signature of the ego in any category of our life, whether it's finances, our home, our love relationships, whatever it is, the signature of the ego is that things are effortful and complicated and require a bunch of work. Maybe they require a bunch of explaining. Like, no. It's cool that I have 4 different savings accounts because here's the thing. 4 years ago, I got an SBA, but like it requires that kind of, in terms of, that's a financial example. That is like the signature of operating from not true, from clench, which can be hard to feel, especially when we're feeling other things like adrenaline and lust and all the stories that can run like, oh my God, this person's exactly what I had hoped for. And this person, like, when was the last time somebody this amazing ever asked me out? And like, we're having so much fun. I mean, like story. Whereas the signature of true self, or I'll use the phrase clarity, is what it sounds like. It's clarity. So it has this, it's not complicated. It's easy. It's simple. And you and I have both had lots of conversations about that word easy, especially in regards to relationship. So it'll be fun for us to take that apart, because we have lots of friends who have, first of all, you and I have both chosen the not easy path and the really, really, really hard path plenty of times. So we learned the hard way. And then we've had friends disagree with us about the value of easy. Because sometimes it feels fun to have complicated and drama and, but that's the signature of ego for sure.
Oh man. Something about talking about relationships makes me want to put my head down on the table, because I think like it gets overloaded so quickly, because they are, there's that book, have you ever read it? I forgot the woman who wrote it, but it's, Janine Roth, and it's Food, God, and Sex. Have you ever seen that book?
No, I read her Women, Food, and God. I haven't read that one. Okay, cool.
Oh, that's it.
Women, Food, and God.
I said Food, God, and Sex.
Yeah, you're like, I just wanted to add sex into it because it's saucy.
Better, frankly. Janine, you're welcome.
You're welcome. That's part 2.
Your second edition. Well, right. And so Janine says that basically you can see anything as a metaphor. Anything is a gateway into understanding yourself better, because of what we've talked about, what you and I have really come to find is true for ourselves over the last, year, but the world is mirroring you. So the way that you engage with food, the way that you engage with relationships, the way that you engage with work and friends, they're all just mirrors for you to understand how you relate to yourself, to others, and to God, right? So with that in mind, relationships seem to be one of the best mirrors around, right?
It's a vivid focus mirror, I find. Yeah.
So vivid. Makes me think of, did I ever tell you this quote? One of my old acupuncture patients used to go to this Buddhist center in New York. And she said that her teacher used to say to her, the mind is a scary place. Don't go in there alone.
They're so good. Yeah.
Well, I feel that way kind of about relationships. Like, oh man, you really need your buddies and your allies and your support, because here's why. We talk about ease, and I want to get back to that, because that's like a really relevant part, and we should kind of bring it home at the end. But the thing that I notice happens in relationships is that when someone is a perfect mirror for our pain bodies and our belief systems, at least at first, if not for a while, it feels comfortable. Yeah. It feels normal. It feels expected. May even feel exciting.
Yeah, to be met, to be mirrored in that way. Like, oh, they get it. It feels like they get it in the beginning.
Yes, they get it. They get me. I get them, because that's your baseline for normal. Like, I don't think I've ever talked about it on the podcast, but have you heard about the term, the working model of love?
No.
Have I talked about that with you? Okay, so it's a psychology term. So they say everybody creates at some point in their life, early on, your working model of love. And your working model of love means just what it really sounds like. It's like, okay, well, I'm watching my parents and I watch how they engage with each other and I watch how they engage with me and then my siblings and my friends. And I'm basically in my mind creating a narrative about what love looks like and what love feels like and what I can expect from love and what will be expected from me in order to keep love and so on and so forth. And we create this idea. Okay, this is what love is like and this is what will be required of me and this is what they will give to me, et cetera, et cetera. So we all have it. It's like walking around like a little blueprint, completely changeable, but nevertheless, it's kind of sketched out in a way and we start to follow it. So what that means is when we meet someone and our pain body and their pain body are lock and key symmetrical, they often look and feel like what we expected from love on that very primal, unconscious level. And there's a comfort in it, even like a resonance, if you will. And I don't know if the resonance is a body resonance or a mental one, but there's some kind of a aha, right? I've met it. I'm here. And so someone might think of that as kind of an ease, and it's not at all what we're talking about. But I think it's important to note because it's like you can't see what you can't see. And it's hard to see our own booby traps because it's like hard to see the forest through the trees. So here we are and we meet someone. Perfect match, lock and key, what we expected. They ask from us what we thought someone would ask for us, and they give to us what we thought someone would give to us on a primal level. And we don't recognize it as a problem because it's, lo and behold, what we expected. And that's where the benevolent other comes in. So we're all more served by having allies in this than I think we are. But do you get what I'm saying about that?
Yeah, totally. And a couple of things that are probably worth saying, like, first, before I forget it. Also, they will often show up. Wolf in sheep's clothing is a little strong because it's not like we all choose bad partners, but in disguise. So like, let's say I'm never going to be with someone like my dad. And then the frame you have in your head for your dad, like in my case, be like, corporate guy and always work came first and whatever. So I'm not going to be with someone like that. And basically I'm just picking these sort of skim the surface characteristics of him. And then I'll meet someone and it's like, oh, he's an artist and he's barely employed. Vanessa's known me for a long time. She's laughing pretty hard right now. So he's not like my dad. But then they wind up being emotionally exact replicas of one another. So I think a lot of times it's worth mentioning, we think we have chosen something completely different, but their actual sort of patterns, emotional patterns and personality makeup winds up being exactly the same, but in a different costume. And then the other thing worth saying, because I'm sure there are probably people wondering, is defining what pain body means. And so just pain body is a term from Eckhart Tolle. And to keep it very, very simple, it is the basically the painful stories that we believe to be true about ourselves. And when those stories are triggered, are activated, we're not our best selves. We're not making our best decisions, and we're operating as if those stories were true. So common pain bodies, and common pain bodies that would be affecting relationship choices would be things like, I'm not worthy of love and affection, or I'm such a giver, but that person's not good at receiving, or, there's a wide variety of pain bodies and we all have a melange of them, but there are certain ones that we will have that lock and key pattern with, where it's like, let's say I'm not worthy of receiving, like nurturing, nourishing love from a partner. And it's my job to just pour myself into a bottomless pit. You'll meet the bottomless pit who's not good at giving, right? And you'll be pouring yourself into somebody who can't give you anything back. And that's just lock and key. It's like, yes, perfect setup. It's what they expect from their relationship blueprint. And it's what I expect from my relationship blueprint. But the problem with that blueprint is that it's very painful for both parties involved and any unfortunate friends or family that have to hear about the drama as the years go on. So, little definition of terms. And then to get to your point about don't go in there alone. Yes, I think for all things, but especially in relationship. And for me, like as somebody who has like one of my, I think, more sticky karmic issues has been love and relationships, or it's one of the places, like if we're going to divide life up into categories, it's been more challenging for me. And it was helpful for me when I got out of a really terrible relationship, like tragically terrible relationship, to go, okay, like it would be useful if I treated this almost as if I'm a person in recovery from an addiction. And one of the things that's great about that is that you out yourself. And I did this to friends, including you. And I said, hey, I have a problem of choosing really bad partners. And in this case, it was like rock bottom bad partners. So it was the wake up call. And so when I started dating again, I went to all my friends and I said, you know, I have this addiction pattern basically, and I'm trying to learn how to rewrite my blueprint and find out how to choose a partner differently. So early on in dating people, if I decided that they were worth more than 2 dates, you know, I'm going to introduce that person to my friends and I want their honest feedback. Now, I also had to be willing to hear it, but it was like a team effort. And you do this in recovery from addiction in other forms too, you know, where you're very upfront with people. I have a problem with this. This does not ever go well for me. And I have blind spots all over the place and I need your help. I need you to kind of suss out the landscape. And you do that with the people who you genuinely trust their input. And that was really helpful for me. I mean, I wound up meeting my partner who was a part of my friend group already, which was even better because he had been scoped out for like, you know, a decade before I met him. He was already vetted. So I didn't have to go through that process, but I had gone through that in dating and it was really helpful. And it was just, it was a many years. Here's where I need my Debbie Downer sound, which I have, by the way. Wah, wah. But for me,
to bring it today.
And of course it's always ongoing, but the dating years were a many years long process of attuning and learning how to rewrite my blueprint and to see, you know, how do I see when I'm being attracted from ego, or in this sort of more refined way that we're talking about, from pain body, versus when am I choosing from something that would actually give me like a yummy, nourishing, supportive, good situation.
Mm-hmm. More like flow and ease and clarity and those kinds of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, there's so much to that, right? I guess, you know, we could use support in every different category. And it's funny about love is like, that's when we least want people's opinions.
Yeah.
Right? Because
like, we just want to run our pattern.
And you don't know me. You don't know him. You don't know her. You know, you don't know us.
That's the signature of complicated. If you have to explain it, it's complicated.
It's complicated. I know. I remember one of my earlier boyfriends, one who had a girlfriend the whole time. Yes, I had a boyfriend who had a girlfriend the whole time and did not know for years. I was 22. But I remember having to explain like what he was doing on Saturday nights, like a lot.
Right. No, you don't understand. It makes perfect sense. Let me explain it.
Because he had his other girlfriend. And, you know, it's like this whole long, complicated drama, you know, but that's what I expected from life. I think it's good to kind of bring it back to what you had said earlier, because you had a lot of good points. My ex-husband, who is a dear, dear friend of mine and a wonderful person, and Brooke also knows him in many capacities, him and I were lock and key for me in some ways in my pain body. And again, he didn't look anything like my father. So, you know, you must all know there's that old psychological thought process that you choose your parent, right? Because you're trying to heal a wound. So, you know, very purposefully, I'm not going to choose my father. I don't want the Italian man. I don't want the machismo guy, although that's not true. I did really like strong men, so I did want that. Maybe just not someone who told me what to do, you know, basic things. I go about, I find my ex, he's nothing like him. And then lo and behold, we get into the relationship a few years in, and our pain bodies are dancing, as well as our true selves. So there was like a lot of real, genuine love and stillness and friendship until our pain bodies flared, which is kind of how it happens a lot, right? It's like there's these moments of ease and then all of a sudden pain bodies flare.
Yeah.
And then ease and then pain bodies. And so when our pain bodies would flare, what would happen is he would get upset. And my experience of feeling like I was walking on eggshells, that was so much of my childhood experience of love, would reemerge. And I realized, oh, yes, okay, I didn't choose my father, quote unquote, or someone like him. What I chose was an experience that would reenact what it felt like for me to be an intimate relationship with people. To be an intimate relationship meant I never knew when the other shoe would drop. I'd walk on eggshells. I'd have to watch what I'd say. It's my job to make them happy. It's my job to please them. Now, mind you, this has nothing to do with my ex-husband. He wasn't asking for it. I mean, he's a part of it. But I'm saying this was just what I walked around in the world with, you know? So we do that. And you know, there's this idea, Brooke and I were talking about this together right before we started recording. There's this idea in relationships that you're probably all familiar with, which is like, I get in this relationship to learn something, right? It's the school of love, just like the school of life. And I choose the wrong partner so I can learn something. And Brooke and I were both saying we've really come to the place where we don't believe that's exactly the truth to say it like that, but that rather what my ex was doing was mirroring my core wounds. That, well, A, I'm not lovable, so someone can leave me. B, my needs were a burden. You know, C, I don't get to exist. I don't get to take up space. It was just a mirror. Now, I kind of want to talk about projection and projective identification, but before I move into that, do you have anything you want to add to this part?
I think that the not learning lessons is an important one, and it's one that like it has a fair bit of nuance to it. And it gets to the ease point a little bit too. Like, so let's say you're in a train wreck situation like I was in. That also is not complicated because my pain body would flare. This person's just mirroring my core wounds. I don't need to stick it out so that I can learn a lesson about, you know, it's actually, if clarity emerges, what that feels like is this very, very simple, no drama, like, no, thank you to that. And like, no, I don't need to do this. No, thanks. Because there's no story about I'll never meet someone else or I'm unlovable or like all the pain body core wound and I need to learn a lesson stuff or like, oh, good, I'm learning lessons and progressing in life goes away. And then in your example, and in any relationship, there's not this like, there's this storyline that happens in time, right? That we pick a person. Like we've all been so indoctrinated to this. And you pick a good person or a bad person or the right person or the wrong person. But it's actually this dance that you do throughout a relationship. And because you're in an intimate relationship, pain bodies will get flared. And so it's what do you do when that dance comes up? Like how do you two meet the pain bodies in a way that they can dissolve? And again, it has that movement of ease and simple and like, okay. Like it's not complicated. It doesn't set new rules or stages or challenges or stories or now we're going to try it this way or maybe I just need to learn this lesson again. It's just, you know, like what is the simple alchemy for the two of you to allow that to dissolve? So I just wanted to dig into that a little bit more. Maybe I did in a way that's more confusing than helpful, but I think that if we can remove this idea of picking right or picking wrong. And instead it's staying engaged in the moment and staying aware. And then what feels like a clench unclench in the moment, as opposed to what feels clench unclench about this person as a whole forever and ever. Should I pick them? Yes, no. It's like it happens step by step. You know, when they ask you for your phone number, is it clench, unclench? Unclench? Yes. Then you give them your number. Then you go on, you know, whatever, a date. And it's just a step by step by step moment. You have your first fight, step by step by step. How does that go?
Well, we don't love that. We don't love that step by step. And even more so with dating, right? Like, don't we just want to like know that this is my person or this isn't my person and kind of like bury in, and then all of those attachments come up?
Yeah.
Because, well, I like being around them. I want them in my life, right? I'm chemically drawn to them. I'm physically drawn to them. I'm emotionally attached. And all of those things can become sort of blinders for what feels true and right for us sometimes. I like what you said when you were kind of highlighting that we don't have to stay to learn a lesson. And I hope I'm not taking it out of context, but I remember sitting around in when I was going to grad school. I think I was in my couples therapy class, and we were talking about relationships and this idea that, like you have to stick it out in this relationship because if you don't resolve your shit, you'll just bring it to the next one. Kind of like
that noise.
Exactly.
Nope. There are easier and harder situations.
A million times over. There are just better people sometimes. And there's just more harmony. And just even some of what I've noticed is that when I let go of a relationship, something in that whole alchemical process of preparing to let go, initiating a let go, going through a let go, perhaps some of my pain bodies healed, or something released and my expectation shifted. And then the next person I drew in wasn't quite the same. Maybe a little similar, but now different. And then again, different, the next one, and then the next one. And so, there's no saying that just because one person triggers my intimacy issue, that the next person will trigger it in exactly that same way.
Yeah. And there's no saying that like just because we're not learning lessons doesn't mean we're not evolving, which is a different thing. That there's more clarity. There's more clarity coming through.
It's not there to teach you.
Right. We don't need to suffer through so we win the prize of a lesson learned.
Yes. And in fact, I think that's just the ego mind clinging to not wanting to lose something.
Yeah.
Not wanting to face loss and grief and temporality. It kind of clings to these cliched, generic things like, oh, but I have to learn a lesson, or like, it's like, I think that's just us not wanting to let go when something doesn't feel right anymore.
Yeah.
I think letting go is really hard.
It is. Heartbreak just sucks, no matter how you slice it.
It sucks. I never want to go through another breakup again, truly. And I know that in myself, and I try to be like, all right, go easy with that. Watch your attachments. Attachments form so fast in relationships. But I mean, the pain for me, I do change a lot, but that moment when you're letting go of something that matters to you, it's so raw and intense. And I think we'll go through a lot sometimes just to avoid that moment. Whether it's stay with someone who we kind of feel in our gut like things just have to change, or whether it's not get involved at all. Yeah. Just because we just don't want to face the moment where we need to let go. It takes so much, in a way, courage and strength, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a really big thing. I wanted to talk a little bit about projection and projective identification and the pain bodies a little bit again, just to build on what you were saying before, Brooke, about the pain bodies. Kieran taught me, and it made sense to me completely from like a neuroscientific lens as well, that when you're looking at pain bodies, that not only do they have a narrative component, so they have this mental component, this belief system, but they also have this physical component, which could be something in your soma, like a tension or a way you move or walk, but also a behavioral aspect. And then, of course, they have feelings. And so they kind of form together this mental, this emotional, and this physical behavioral aspect to the pain body. So, for example, my belief that I'm unlovable comes with other kinds of thoughts. It triggers a whole cascading series of thoughts. It comes with me choosing a certain way, behaving a certain way, maybe not speaking my mind, maybe holing up in my room and not calling anyone when I'm sad. And then it also comes with emotions. Perhaps it's shame, perhaps it's sadness. And it's like it feeds itself. Your pain bodies, they really have a life of their own. And that's why maybe if any of you can notice that sometimes you behave in ways that kind of shock you. Like, I don't know, like, how did I say that? How could I have done that? Why did I do this? And it's like, well, because once that pain body took over, it has its own kind of life force, its own kind of repertoire, its own habits that it kicks into. And then you're in the middle of a fight with your partner going, why don't I shut the fuck up? And yet here come all of these words or these patterns, right? So that's kind of how the pain bodies like functions, right? Okay. So a couple of things happen with our pain bodies when they're active. We have a habit of projecting our pain onto the world. So I feel unlovable. That's my pain body. And I look at my ex-husband, Frank, bless him. He was the one that was the most active during. And I ignore everything that conflicts with I'm unlovable, like the fact that he married me, which is a pretty big sign that he loved me. And I focus in and I project upon him all of these thoughts that I have, right? So I don't know. Maybe he's in a bad mood and he doesn't want to like talk that night. And I project onto him that Vanessa's bothersome and Vanessa's too much and he needs space from Vanessa. And I project my pain body thoughts onto him. And I go about believing that's true. This is one of the ways that we can re-experience our trauma in a relationship, is just by believing that other people think and feel the way our pain body projects.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So common. We all do that. In fact, probably we could say we project our whole life. That's why everything is a metaphor.
That's why it's called awakening, waking up out of that story dream you keep having.
Yes. That you are buying into hook, line, and sinker.
Right.
Okay. So that's a psychological term. Projective identification is another psychological term. It means not only am I projecting my thoughts onto someone, like if I'm unlovable, then you are the person who does not love me. But I am creating circumstances and conditions that literally pull that forward out of someone.
Yeah.
Right? Like self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. Because they're forced to respond to all of your behaviors that are saying, show me this, I believe this.
Exactly. Yeah. Eventually, in our dance of synchronicity, and this won't work with everybody, but they must be set up in just such a way, and we're pulling for it, and they don't want to lose us, so they buy into the game, and then next thing you know. So the story I always tell is like one of my mentors, who was a Gestalt therapist and a wonderful lady, grew up in a traumatized household. She was beat a lot. She was yelled at a lot. There was a lot of domestic violence in her household of origin. She was used to that in relationships. So this is the working model of love. She'd get into relationships. She'd start fights, screaming, breaking things, the norm. She never thought much of it. But she was a sharp lady, as we all are actually, that I think are in this conversation. Eventually she got hip, like I'm the only common denominator, right? I think this is a problem. She probably started healing some of the underlying attachment wounds. And eventually she meets a really nice guy, and he's adorable. And every time they start to get into a fight, she starts to scream. And the guy's like, hey, Stella, would you mind just leaving the room? And let's talk later when you calm down. Mm-hmm. And which makes her what? Ballistic.
Right, I know.
Ballistic, right? So she'd go at him again. And this kept going on and on and on. Until one day, and I think it was like at least a year in, if not more. One day they're fighting. She's going at him. She says he grabs her like by the shoulders and he picks her up and he throws her onto the couch. And she says, like, as she landed, she realized in her head, like it all came to clarity. I created this. Mm. I pulled for this in him.
Yeah.
And she stopped. And he stopped. He's her husband. That was it. It never happened again. And good that she had that clarity. But in this way, it's like these pain bodies, these narratives, these working models of love, they can be so strong. They can feel so real and so true that we pick partners who mirror them.
Yeah.
Lock and key. And or B, we pick perfectly lovely people and we push for it.
Yeah.
You're going to cheat on me. You're going to cheat on me. You're going to cheat on me. You're not trustful. You're not trustworthy. So eventually they're like, oh, fuck,
Right. Yeah.
So that's some interesting shit, no?
Yeah. So I have a couple of important things to say, and it actually loops us around to ease. So
Eureka.
Pain bodies, I think, are the closest thing I have to a belief in demonic possession.
I actually a little bit believe in demonic possession. I'm just saying.
And other people do.
You
I know.
audience.
Right. For me, what I got for demonic possession is pain bodies. They're real. We all have them and we get overtaken by them. So everything you just said, and it's been helpful for me in my current relationship, which is with, he's probably listening, sorry, which is with a lovely human being. We love you. Hi. That we both have the capacity to talk about this, that we have pain bodies and that we can, label them sounds a little too academic, but we can, I guess, have awareness about certain flavors that rise to the top for us most frequently. And when they become active, it's impossible in that moment to say, hey, your pain body's active. And like it's a switch you turn off because an active pain body doesn't work that way. It's like, fuck you. No, it's not. However, that we can both have these conversations when we're not in active pain bodies so that when either one of us is having a triggered pain body, we can very, very gently, at least in our own minds, treat it as passing demonic possession. And
that seems like a common advice.
Yeah. And well, it's like we're flared. It doesn't mean ignore them or anything, but it's like literally nothing productive is going to happen in this flared moment. Really, it's not. It's this person pulling for the response they expect and the other person doing the exact same thing. So being able to be in a partnership where you can have this, you don't have to call it demonic possession, but where you just have enough space to say, this is not the entirety of who they are. This is not the entirety of who I am. And we can just give it a little spaciousness. What I want to make sure to be very, very, very careful about saying in this conversation as somebody who's been in not one, but two very significantly abusive relationships in my life. This is not an excuse for abusive behavior, whether verbal, physical, emotional, manipulative. And so we have to be really careful that we're not giving excuses to people for treating us extremely poorly. And abusive relationships have this signature of it's either heaven, paradise, we're the most perfect, everything's the most amazing. If only there weren't these stormy moments, and the stormy moments are abuse, and the whole thing is abuse because the story of, but everything's perfect right now is just a hook to be able to keep you in the abusive relationship. So please, please, please do not take any of these stories as, these kinds of triggered pain bodies. It should feel like there's a permeability and a lightness and a workability with them. This should not be anyone flinging abusive behavior on you. And that is always a no, thank you. Nobody needs to stay in an abusive situation.
But that's where the compassion piece comes in because all right, sometimes abuse is just, it's so obvious, it's so dominant. Anyone looking from the outside, anyone from the inside is aware of it. It's just a horrific, observable experience. Sometimes abuse, or let's say this dramatic dance, looks a lot like pain, good, pain, good, pain, good. That's where I think it becomes especially sticky for people because what they project then is you're actually a very good person. You're a good woman. You're a good man. You just have these pain bodies. So no big deal. You just need to heal them and then we'll be okay. Right? I think that's such a common thought process. I mean, I don't know, we're 43, right? So, well, you're not 43, but close.
42, close.
Yeah. But so I know a lot of this has come through my own maturational process, my own experience. But when people say to me, but they're a good person inside, I'm like, no, that is the catch-all for this justifies their behavior.
Yeah.
That's the saying that is the catch-all, that it's like, I'm going to wash over the fact that their behavior is creating harm.
Yeah.
Now, you all know, listening probably by now, and Brooke, you know that I believe everyone is essentially good. I believe that. But if their behavior is shitty, I go by their behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. And, there are certain things that are more workable than others. And somebody who has an abusive personality or abusive behavior in a relationship, that's a very, very, very entrenched psychological pattern. And I think that anytime we're in a relationship based on, but someday in my magical future, it'll be different. No. It's like all relationships go through their ups and downs. We all have our arguments and those kinds of things, but it should be the kind of thing that in the present tense, you genuinely want to be in. If it's something you want to be in once it's all fixed in the future, no, that's a no for me.
Right. Well, I guess so. As we're talking about relationships, how do you know which aspect of self you're choosing from? If you notice, you're like, well, if only they would. Yes. You're already caught.
You're in the ego. You're in the story.
You're in the ego. That's for sure the story. Do y'all know the term attachment, right? So that's a psychological term. I know Brooke knows it. I know it. It comes up a lot around intimacy. So we have these like attachment patterns, which ultimately are like, how do we show up in intimacy? How do we relate? How much space do we like? How much closeness can we tolerate? How much can we open ourselves? How much can we keep ourselves private in appropriate ways? That's kind of the idea of attachment. So they're the ways that we engage with intimacy. Now, what research shows is that our attachment pattern is determined by the time we're 2 years old. In fact, with very good success, Brooke, if I was interviewing your mother back in the day-o, while you were just in that womb, I would already be able to predict your attachment style.
Yep.
That's how obvious it is. And that's how clear we are taught what love will look and feel like by the people who raised us, by our communities, by our friends, but most certainly by our families. So, we go through life with this attachment style. And then, yes, I think we see the world through that. That's how we draw people. We draw these kinds of like locks and keys. I think we all know that we've picked people who aren't good for us. Those lucky people who never did that?
Really? No, I don't know anyone who's done that.
These people who like pick someone good and they just like married them.
They just stick the landing on the first time. No, I do not know anyone who's done that. So
I have some clients like that. God bless you.
We all have our easy karma sometimes in that category.
Most of us. Relationships are a healing process. We're picking people according to our attachment style and according to our expectations and our working model of love. And then in that, we're having epiphanies, we're having insights, we're finding courage to let go, we're learning how to communicate, where all of these different things are happening. And, we keep evolving from there. So I think a couple of things. One is it's good to have a lot of compassion for yourself. If you're a bad picker, if you've been stuck in a relationship that as you're listening to us, you're like, oh shit, that's me. If you've done it 4 times in a row, any of these things. One is to have a lot of compassion because the working model of love is very deeply ingrained. It's very hard to see on your own. And it can be very persistent because love is so core and essential to us that those pain bodies are very tender. 2 is even neuroscience shows, and of course anecdotal experience and Brooke and I's experience, that you can always change. That's the beauty of it.
Just you actually can, guys. It's fucking awesome.
It's awesome. Today you can wake up and decide like I deserve love. Yeah. And not this. And not this experience that you call love that doesn't feel so loving.
Yeah, that actually feels awful.
Awful. I get to do something different. And that's kind of the good news. So I guess we should talk about that.
Yeah, there are 2 things, like as we're wrapping up here. When I got out of an abusive relationship, and then I was single for many, many years, and kind of like dating, meaning like literally one date with one person and then one date with another. So not relationships at all. And there were two sort of guiding lights that I used during that time. And one was from a trauma therapist who I worked with as I recovered from the relationship. And she said, it will be simple. Look for something that has the signature of simple. Everything, whatever the story of their job is, the story of their whatever, kids, it will be simple. And it will be simple to connect because they will live near you and you will have things in common and you will genuinely want to be with them. Simple, 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 which sounds so boring to a lot of people, including me, which is why, I've chosen a lot of agitating relationships. And then the other one came from you, Vanessa, which was lovely. And you said, it will be easy, which sounded like a stupid fairy tale idea to me and also a little boring.
Yeah, you said boring. Boring was, you were like,
and,
snooze.
As a part of my recovery, like without getting into this too much, I read this sort of bullet point map of what the psychological blueprint of adult children of alcoholics, and like 99% of it described me to a T. So if you want a blueprint of my psychology, just read about that blueprint. But one of the things that I read and it blew my mind, I was like, I can't believe that's on the list. It said you become addicted to excitement. And I was like, huh. And think of how many of us have grown up around addiction or grown up around even just like people who are bad tempered and all those things. And in a certain way, we become addicted to excitement. It feels like intimacy. It feels like love. So all the stuff you were already talking about before. So I would say romance. It feels like romance. Oh, it's such a big deal. It's so amazing. And so looking for the signatures of simple and ease has put me into a relationship that is not a snooze fest. It's not devoid of passion and excitement and fun and connection and nourishment. It's just that it's not crazy. It's just that we live near each other. The kids are the same. It's just straightforward and good. Which doesn't mean we don't have our stuff. I already talked about our pain bodies, so there's still like sorting things human. Out, but from the place of sanity.
Right, because you get to be human.
Right.
I actually think a lot of people are looking for a feeling of excitement in relationship. We have a lot of fairy tales and expectations built up on what good will feel like. And, if y'all are like me, I never really saw a good relationship. That wasn't my childhood model. So I didn't know what one would look like. So I'm going to create one, right? And I'm going to create, this is what it must look like, right? And then you want that and people want excitement and it's a very common thing. And what happens is when people's pain bodies match your own, what I've noticed is it does feel very exciting. Like probably what it really is nerve-wracking, but you identify it as excitement.
Well, it starts as this like consuming adrenaline. I got to be with them all the time. It's so amazing. Yes, this is not like a signature of something that like
it's very hard to differentiate until you've tried both, I think.
Yeah, it is.
Like until you've had the other, you're like, oh, I didn't realize that like nuanced difference between like falling in love and like anxiously clinging to something and like getting worked up and feeling like I'm always going to lose it. So I want it more, that kind of adrenaline rush. And so as your attachment patterns changing, as you're healing, what actually happens is you get around someone and it may not feel that same way.
Yeah.
So actually the transition phase can be a little hard for people.
Yeah.
But I just want to quickly add a story of how it began to change for me, because my working model of love, I had a lot of fear because my working model of love is you get smothered by it. I grew up in an Italian family. That's probably enough said, but my parents were just lovely and controlling, and you get smothered by it. That was my expectation. So I set about very unconsciously trying to find people who wouldn't smother me, which meant people who like freedom, just like I like freedom, which meant people who also didn't love commitment that much. And then I went about my adult life banging my head against the wall, trying to understand why no one wanted to commit to me quite at that same level as I wanted to commit to them. They did commit to me, but it was always like this nuanced difference. Like I wanted more than them, until I did some deep soul searching, like Stella did. Like I am the only one involved in this equation consistently. So what is it that I keep attracting these relationships into my life where I'm banging my head against the wall because I want a certain level of commitment that they're not ready for? And that was when I discovered like, oh, because that's my setup. That's what I'm doing. It's like, well, I want a certain amount of intimacy, but I don't want too much. So here's my game. I don't believe I can have it all. I don't believe I can find someone who can like give me freedom, but also give me connection and also stay present, right? So I'm trying to game the system based on a wound. And what I'm going to do is find someone who loves me, but they love freedom, and then they'll never smother me, which totally worked for that, right? Only I didn't get the commitment I want. And then I just was like, oh, I'm unlovable, which was completely not true. Actually was loved by all of these people. It's just how we explain it. So I had this epiphany of how I was gaming the system and what I was doing and how my wounds were active. My pain body was calling the shots on who I was drawn towards. And it stopped. I don't know. It doesn't always happen like that, but it did. I just had an epiphany and I was like, you know what? I'm okay with commitment. I will be okay with commitment. And then I found my perfectly boring, easy husband.
Yeah. Who you totally delight in and are nourished by. And you guys have a freaking great life together.
Every second of every day, we are in love. And it is incredible. And in the beginning, I always knew I wanted him and I loved it. Like it was clear he was for me. But I was like, this is different. This is so boring, predictable. Like, I don't even understand. Like, why aren't we out partying more? I don't know, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So that is to say that these ways that these old core issues show up and then draw people towards us or push people away from us or stay longer than we should stay, they're very deep, but they can be exposed. Sometimes on your own, a lot of times with some good support. I mean, can't say that enough when it comes to relationship. I think it's the area we have the most attachments.
Yeah.
And they can be let go. And, you can heal and you can find delicious love.
Yay to delicious love. We'll leave it at that. Write us about your delicious love and any epiphanies you have.
Yeah. Let's talk about sex. I mean, love.
We'll do that one next. Like we always do. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. The show notes, including any of the resources we mentioned, live as always at blissandgrit.com. So if you go to the website and scroll down, you're going to see each episode's separate post, and the resources are within that post. You can also come talk with us on social media. We're usually at Instagram and Facebook, and we're Bliss and Grit at both of those spots. If you want to support the show, the most wonderful thing you could do for us right now is to write a review on iTunes, on Stitcher, or on our Facebook page, which again is Bliss and Grit. We also have a new subscribe form on the website where you can subscribe and you'll get information about any kind of goodies we have brewing for the future. We have really loved hearing from all of you. It helps other people to find the show. It helps us to know what your thoughts are. So huge gratitude to those of you who've written reviews already. Here is one from Carol Y. in the UK. This is my must-listen podcast. Love the rapport and the topics really resonate and are approached in a nuanced and thoughtful way. Great balance of reassurance, you're not alone, and reframing, oh, not looked at it that way. Also a great gateway to other thinkers and content. Thank you, Brooke and Vanessa, and please keep it up. We definitely will. Thank you so much for that, and we'll be back next week.